Do you struggle to set goals and stick to them?
Since that day, I've always used what's known as the Eisenhower Matrix. You write down all the things in front of you and they go into one of four boxes. Urgent, short time, gotta happen, non-negotiables, just get them done as efficiently as you can. And then the final one, this is the bit that most people don't spend anywhere near enough time on.
Very few places set you up better for discipline and determination than the army. So what military lessons can we steal to plan big and achieve more?
People often ask, how and why did you go from flying helicopters to being a financial planner? They're actually more comparable than you might imagine because they all have a similar process behind them. In the army, it's a 7-step process. In financial planning, it's a 6-step process. So from start to finish, it's along the lines of...
Henry Anderson spent 18 years in the British Army before rapidly pivoting to become a financial advisor. So he knows a thing or two about going after your goals. Tell us about the networking that you did. How did you go about it and why is it so important?
If you believe the process I've just said, which is find out what's really important to you and then find the right environment to do that in, the best way to find that out is to talk to people.
How many outreach messages did you make and roughly how many people did you end up speaking to?
Is the number on that spreadsheet.
Hello and welcome to The Switch from St James's Place Financial Advisor Academy. I'm Gee Foottit. If you're ready for a better, more fulfilling career, this is your go-to resource to start that journey. Henry, a very warm welcome to the show.
Good morning, Gee. Thanks very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, you transitioned careers from the military into financial advice, and it took you less than 2 years from the start of that career change to achieve the highest qualification in the field. Tell us a bit about that.
So yeah, obviously being a career changer, I knew that I had relevant skills in my background, and I knew that whatever I was going to do, I was going to put a huge amount of effort into. But I felt like the weakness in my sort of offering was, well, if I haven't been doing it a long time, how do people know that I'm good at this? And yeah, getting a bit of paper that recognises that I've spent a lot of time investing my skill set, investing in my knowledge is a great thing to have.
Fantastic. And have you got a strong formula for setting goals?
Yeah, it's the most important thing is working out what really excites you and what's going to motivate you. Because doing anything difficult and a career change is a difficult thing to do. You're going to need a lot of energy for that. And the way you find that energy is to spend a lot of time working out what's really important to you. How do you want to spend your life?
And often people want to skip that part, invest the time in the understanding of themselves and where they want to go. So, Henry, is there anything from your military career that's enabled you to be A, really good at setting goals, but B, actually sticking to them? Can you maybe list your top 3 things?
Yeah. So firstly, time is really precious. There will always be way more things you could do than you should do. And you've got to be really disciplined about working out which are the high value things to do and do as much of that as you can, and which things don't contribute to where you want to get to, and consciously don't do those and be comfortable with that. The second one is have a goal. So how are you going to decide what is the valuable thing to do if you don't have a goal? So always, whether it's a new role, a project you're working on, an individual piece of work, you've always got to have a goal for it, because that's what helps you decide if something is valuable and worthwhile doing or it isn't.
And what would the final piece of advice be?
If you're going to do anything, do it really well. Do it to the best of your standards. It's much better to not do something than to do something half-heartedly. So do it or don't.
I love that. And has that ethos come from the military, do you think, or just internally?
Yeah, absolutely. The military does make you, it kind of forces you to make these decisions because there will always be a surplus of things you can do, but it applies anywhere. There'll never be a shortage of people making suggestions or you having bright ideas, and they all seem great at the time, but being able to work out which ones are really useful, that's the key to actually making meaningful progress in the right direction.
Such valuable information. Don't be a busy fool. Anybody can be busy and have lots to do, but it's just spend your time on the things that matter the most and having that North Star in terms of a goal and the direction you want to travel in. Really good advice. Now, we had a quick conversation before we started recording, and we wanted to understand in the interview the difference between being disciplined and being motivated. Now, we touched upon motivation briefly. Now, my opinion of somebody in the military would be very disciplined. But what was that like? What was your experience in the military like in terms of discipline?
Yeah, so the stereotype is that people in the armed forces spend their time being rigidly, explicitly told what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. And that is true on occasions, but is actually probably the biggest myth or misinterpretations people have about what it's like in the armed forces. it's actually much more autonomous than people would imagine. You have a huge amount of flexibility and choice about where you take your career, how you spend your time, how you deal with problems. It's all about getting to the outcome people want, not how you get there. But the question is still an important one. What's the difference between discipline and motivation? I think motivation is the ideal one. You want someone to want to do something, but discipline is around turning up and doing something, whether you want to do it or not, essentially. And so they seem like really similar things, and they're very closely related, but they are subtly different, I think.
And how do you stay motivated, or how have you throughout your career, and have the reasons behind it changed?
I haven't always found professional motivation that straightforward, actually. Prior to deciding that I wanted to join the armed forces, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a specific goal. But the day I decided that that's what I wanted to do, I never struggled for motivation, and have never struggled since then. And the same applied to joining the forces. It applied throughout my career, and then applies today going through the career change. So the key lesson I've learned personally is, if you really, really understand what you want to do and why, finding motivation will be straightforward. And if you're struggling for motivation, it's probably because you haven't picked the right thing to do yet.
Take a step back and spend the time really working out what it is you want to do.
Absolutely.
Now, we will be exploring your methods for setting goals, because I think they're going to be really helpful to lots of people in this position, changing career. Now, you had an 18-year career in the British Army doing many different roles. Just give us a really high-level overview of some of the things that you did whilst in the Army.
As everyone does, they go through an element of training. I spent a year at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, which is where Army officers start their career. I then spent a few months in Iraq, gaining some experience before I then started training as a helicopter pilot. And that's where I spent most of my career. So probably about half of it was in flying roles, which took me all over the world, which is incredibly exciting. That was a huge motivator for me. And then you get to a point where you've not outgrown it, but you need to take on a bit more responsibility, and so you start diversifying to other roles. And I did probably about 5 roles after that before realizing I'd enjoyed it so much, but it was time for a change.
What are some of the skills you've brought with you from your military roles into your current role as a financial advisor?
Okay, so whatever you do in the forces, you're quite likely to have been given some kind of process to stick to. And it's not there to be like adhered to rigidly. That'd be a little bit pointless. But the point being is, when things are really stressful, when things are really complex, you need a set of tools that you can turn to that you know are going to give you a good enough answer pretty quickly. So whatever it is you're trying to do, have a process for that.
And also things, for me, words that spring to mind when speaking about the military people from within: integrity, being a good people person. Is that true as well?
Yeah, absolutely critical. So most people, all people in the armed forces are in a leadership role to some degree. And the key thing that underpins leadership is trust. No one's going to believe in what you're saying or want to do it with you if they don't trust you. And integrity, if you don't have integrity, you're not going to earn that trust. So yeah, integrity is a non-negotiable, whatever you do.
Amazing. Now, you mentioned being able to deal with whatever you're faced with. Now, I've heard that there's a 7-step problem-solving process to help you overcome any of these hurdles. Can you talk us through what that looks like and how these can be applied in other situations?
I actually cover this quite a bit because people often ask, like, how and why did you go from flying helicopters to being a financial planner? And I tell people that they're actually more comparable than you might imagine, because they all have a similar process behind them. In the Army, it's a 7-step process. In financial planning, it's a 6-step process. They're broadly the same. So from start to finish, it's along the lines of really, really, really understand the environment you're working in. So in the military, that would be like the geography, who's there, who are the stakeholders. In financial planning, it's exactly the same, but for the individual. Where are they today? How did they get there? Who's really important to them? What are their kind of core values? So that's where you always start. The next one is, going back to it again, what outcome are you aiming for? What's the goal? Because if you really, really work out what the goal is, or which tools to apply, becomes quite straightforward, actually. Then onto that note, what steps do you need to achieve to get to that goal? And then which tools do you need to use to achieve those steps? when's the best time to do it, which resources do you apply to it, and then how do you risk manage it? What measures do you need to have to put in place to keep it on track?
It's amazing when you talk through that step process, it does feel obvious, but you're right. I think prior to you actually walking through that process, flying helicopters, giving financial advice would not have felt like a comparable career, right? But you've made that transition, and easily because of exactly this 7-step process. It's something that you still apply today in your current role.
Yeah, absolutely. So, whatever the problem is, if you break it down into incremental parts, it actually becomes relatively straightforward and feels much more manageable.
What attracted you to financial advice?
So it was actually a specific moment. When I was leaving the forces, I was at an Insight event not that far from here, different company, and they recruit a certain number of veterans every year, as a lot of the city firms do. And they showed me a tool that I now use every day. It's a cash flow model. It doesn't sound very exciting, but for me, it was amazing because they basically showed us how they map out like the financial future for their clients. So you can project where they'll be in 10, 20 years time. And therefore that allows you to diagnose what interventions you need to make to get them where they want to be. And I suddenly had this moment where I realized that the skill set and experience I had in the military really aligned with a role that was in demand outside of the military. And most importantly, it used skills that, or things that were really important to me as well. So being in the forces is really about working with people. And this is literally applying those tools for individuals, helping people out, and problem solving. I love problem solving. I'm attracted to difficult problems, as many people in the forces are. And I suddenly realized that this is it. This is what I want to do.
Fantastic. Now, there'll be people listening who are considering a career change themselves. Many of them, on paper, things might look completely uncorrelated, as flying helicopters, financial advisor was for you, until you really dug deeper and realised that there were lots of similarities and transferable skills. So I think it's often hard for people to see their own positives in their sort of transferable skills or their traits. How can people learn to recognise them in themselves?
Yeah, I struggle with this a little bit. Ask your friends. And we're not talking like your nice friends. You want to talk to your really, really honest friends. I actually started doing this because someone offered it to me. I didn't ask for it, and they told me I needed it. And they said, I'm going to describe how I view you and how other people view you. And I remember it very clearly. It was a phone call, and he told me exactly how people view me, and it was actually reasonably complimentary. But it wasn't the things I was thinking about. So have some really trusted friends. Ask them their opinion on what you do and what you're great at and what you're not great at and what motivates you, because you always need a second opinion on everything, and they'll help you get that clarity.
So what did he say, and how did it differ from your view at that point?
It was things like, you always get stuff done. Like, if you give it to Henry, it is going to happen. And I liked that. That appealed, but that isn't necessarily how I would have pitched myself to companies at that point. At that time of my career change, I was dealing with there's lots of choices out there, which one's right for me. And I was trying to make myself fit my impression of what people look for in those environments. Whereas actually it's the correct way is the other way around. Obviously you are going to need to evolve, you are going to need to change a bit, but actually the core of who you are shouldn't change, and finding the right place for your skill set and who you are is really key.
And I think that's the trouble with people who are thinking about what transferable skills do I have. The things that you do apply day in, day out in your current environment, you don't necessarily see as being valuable elsewhere. So it's quite hard for people to really pinpoint those really valuable things. So it was great that you had a third party come in and tell you, if I give you something, I know it's going to be done. You are very trustworthy. You commit on your obligations. And actually, those are really great for transferable skills, particularly in financial advice that you've come into.
People tend to focus way too much on like hard skills or qualifications. Mm-hmm. It's really the soft skills you've picked up in who you are, your experiences. They're the things that are going to really help you out. Things like qualifications you can pick up on the way.
Now, we mentioned qualifications, and you very quickly got to the highest level achievable within the financial advice profession. So it sounds like you've continued to upskill throughout your career. How much of the role has that played in your career success, would you say?
This is quite an interesting one because, let's be honest, most people we interact with in terms of clients have no idea what qualifications are available. They assume you're qualified, but they don't know there are different professional bodies, and they don't know that there are different levels to the qualification. And why should they? So really, it was more of an internal thing. When I decided where I wanted to work, I actually looked at a lot of different places to work before I bumped into the team I work with. And one of the reasons I picked that company is because they're young, they're fast growing, they're exciting, they're adaptable, but also they're really, really technically proficient. And I realized early on that if I want to be really good at what I do now, I'm going to need to pick the right place to learn. And that was probably the biggest reason I chose to work with that company. So the reason I went for Certified Financial Planner, which is a level 7 qualification, it's the only level 7 qualification available to UK financial planners, is partly so that it's to give me the confidence. I knew I'd invested the time. I knew I'd done my due diligence on the best place I could find to work. And I've spent all my time there getting every bit of knowledge I can from my colleagues. But what I wanted was a bit of paper to confirm that. And that's what CFP was for me, really. You shouldn't go for these high level qualifications expecting to have to learn too much. They're more evidence of what you learn. And that's why it was really important to me. I wanted to know that if I'm giving advice to a client, I know what I'm doing, and I've got the evidence to prove that I know what I'm doing.
Absolutely. And in the advice profession, it is highly regulated. So you're not able to give advice without the entry level qualification, which is level 4, and you've achieved level 7, which is fantastic. And absolutely, that's a badge of honour. It gives you confidence. It gives your clients confidence as well. Now, a lot of people assume it's down to maybe the employer to upskill you. But in financial advice, it's almost like working for yourself within a business, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So you realise that it's on you to do that. How can you get people to spend time investing in themselves, especially when maybe time is scarce?
Well, going back to it, if they don't have the motivation, someone's not going to get it. I'd say most people don't pass these qualifications because they lose motivation halfway through it. If you decided it's important for you, you will find the motivation and you will get it done. And they are certainly some of the latter bits of work, they're quite serious. They require a lot of motivation and some sacrifice. But if you've gone back to where do I want to get to, what's the most important things I can do to get me there, well, you'll find the motivation because you'll realise you've got to do it if it's important to you.
You make the time, you find the time.
Yes, in my case, I took a week's holiday, didn't go to Portugal with my family, and spent it preparing for a case study. Yeah, it was a big sacrifice, felt pretty rubbish at the time, but feels like a good investment.
Fantastic. And thank you for sharing that really personal part of your journey, because everybody will have their own personal circumstances outside of work. And it's balancing those things, isn't it, to achieve, like you say, you've got your North Star, the goal. Mm-hmm. And it's taking, I guess, the people in your life from a personal perspective on the journey with you. So I'm sure that your family wanted you to be there, but they also understood.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a key thing. If you're going to be really disciplined about what you do and don't do, I think if you can explain to the important people around you, so colleagues or family, why you're doing it or why you're not, they will understand. And obviously, yeah, it felt like a pretty big price to pay at the time. Obviously, we did go away as a family as well.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And if it isn't worth it, don't do it, because you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know you worked really hard at the beginning of your career change to network. You said you found this company that you're now with. Tell us about the networking that you did. How did you go about it, and why is it so important?
Okay. So why is it important is because if you believe like the process I've just said, which is find out what's really important to you and then find the right environment to do that in, well, how are you going to work out what the right environment is unless you find out what it's actually like? And the best way to find that out is to talk to people. How did I do that? I literally wrote down what I thought I might want to do after the forces. I then researched who are the biggest brands in those areas. And then I went and found people who worked in those companies and used to be in the forces. And LinkedIn was the tool for that.
Brilliant.
It's straightforward. You type in the company, click people, select their previous employer as Army, Navy, RAF, Royal Marines, and you've now got a list of veterans who now work in these companies. And then, without being spammy about it, like you're asking someone for their time, so you've got to be You've got to always remember that. But if you get in touch with a few people in those companies, ask them for half an hour of their time to help you understand if what they do is the right thing for you. Most people love helping other people, and you'll find that they're very receptive to it. And before you know it, they're introducing you to a friend of theirs or a colleague of theirs who you think you should talk to. It's spiraled out of control really quickly. So you've got to be disciplined with your time. You've still got a day job you've got to deliver on, but actually you've also got to look after yourself, and 2 or 3 phone calls a week to make sure that you can still concentrate on your current role because a plan's developing for the future one, I think is a fair use of your time on everyone.
I love that story, and thank you again for sharing it. I think that would sound quite scary to lots of people maybe listening, that sort of cold approach to somebody on LinkedIn they don't necessarily know. How did people respond to your messages? You said that they were quite helpful, but how did you feel sending them, and how quickly did people respond?
I think if you're really honest about why you're doing it, which in my case was, I literally needed some help, and I think you might have some of the answers. Are you willing to? People like helping people. There's also like finding rapport is always important. Whenever you meet someone, if you can find some common ground, common interests, you'll find that you naturally click. And of course, being a veteran, by default, the assumption is if someone was also a veteran, we're going to click, because you have to do that all the time in the forces. And it's always interesting to see what people are doing. Like, people like to tell you the good sides, the downsides, whether they enjoy it or not. It's all helping each other out.
And I like what you said about being disciplined with how many calls or messages you're going to send each week if you are in a current role. It's making sure you're moving forwards. Yeah.
So it did mean that I had lots of calls at funny times of day. Like, some people might even be in other countries, so you've got to. Well, it's quite straightforward to schedule it, and it's going to be before or after work anyway. But most people are very happy to help, and of course, always pay it forward. So I now get loads of calls from people, a couple of years behind me, and want to know whether what I do now is right for them or not. And I will always very happily give them my time.
That's fantastic. And give us an idea of numbers so people can have a view of the level of commitment that it had from your perspective. So how many outreach messages did you make, and roughly how many people did you end up speaking to?
So I still have the log, because if you're actually trying to like get maximum value from someone's time and take it seriously, you should keep a record of just key things, like not recording their words, but like what were the key things they told you, who were the connections they suggested, and I kept a record of that, and I've still got a record of that. But yeah, 200 is the number on that spreadsheet. Yeah, because you'll find you talk to one person and they want to help you out and offer a couple more.
So you had 200 conversations with people?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And how many messages did you send out then?
Quite interestingly, I found that 99% plus of people responded. It was almost everyone who asked for help wanted to help.
That is such good advice and such a lovely story to hear, because I feel a lot of people, the fear would stop them doing that. But my advice to them would be the same as yours. We have in St James's Place Academy, BBQ, Be Brave Quicker. Did you come across that when you were in the academy?
Yeah, no, I've hit that out, yeah.
And it's a little bit exactly what you did before you came to the academy. It's get out of your own way. I have a problem I want to solve, and I think you can help me solve it. And being vulnerable and saying, I'd like your help. Very few people that won't say yes to helping someone else.
Yeah, but it didn't feel brave at the time, because actually I knew the person I was talking to would also understand what I was trying, and I just explained why I was doing it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do something difficult. You've done something difficult. I'd love to hear how it went, and any chance you can help me out. And of course, the deal being, I'm going to do the same for the people behind me. Yes, it didn't feel brave at the time. Just remember, people love helping people.
They do. And what an amazing insight. You've spoken to 200 people before you've really made the decision to have that career change yourself. I think you're a shining example of putting the work in and making sure you're making the right choice. So really good advice. So I want to pick your brains more on the goal setting element of how you've achieved such a speedy process through your qualifications and into your new career. What processes or methods do you use when you're setting your own goals?
So around 10 years ago, I was in a role that was really, really demanding, loads of different projects on the go, way more than I could actually deal with. And I was talking to my line manager at the time, and just saying, look, there's too much on here. How should I go about dealing with this? What do we need to prioritise? And he told me how he runs his professional life, having done similar roles when he was a bit more junior. And since that day, I've always used what's known as the Eisenhower Matrix. You write down all the things in front of you that are available to do, and they go into one of 4 boxes. Urgent, short time, got to happen, non-negotiables. Just get them done as efficiently as you can. Then you've got stuff that is low value, longer term stuff. Just don't do it, and be completely comfortable with not doing it, because that is not going to get you and your organization going in the right direction. Then you've got shorter term tasks that relatively low value, probably most people could do. So try and outsource those. Use software, use a tool, share it with a colleague, whatever it is, but try get rid of much of that as you can. And then the final one, this is the bit that most people don't spend anywhere near enough time on. This is what are the long-term things that are really high impact? So for me, that was becoming a certified financial planner, level 7, all that stuff. I knew that was something I needed long-term. Wasn't going to happen if I just tried to fit in an hour a day. So I made a block of time, committed to that, and it happened.
So how do you break down long-term goals into daily or weekly actions, the little milestones?
Yeah, well, that's the key thing is break down every task into small pieces, because it's just overwhelming when you try to look at everything in totality. So once you've decided what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, put it into little chunks, allocate time to it. That's the key thing. Allocate time to it in advance and do everything you can to stick to that. There'll always be something or someone that tries to take you off that course. But if you realize why it's important, you'll be able to tell them why you need to stick to it. And sometimes you won't be able to. In fact, most of the time you won't be able to. But if you try your very best to stick to the plan you've got, you will make steady progress in that direction. Bite-sized chunks in the right direction.
Progress, I feel, is the key word. If people feel like and are making progress, there's a sense of satisfaction that you get from that. Whether you, like you say, whether you reach the goal at the intended time or not, if you've made progress towards it and you genuinely are moving in the right direction, that gives you the confidence and the motivation to keep going, doesn't it?
Yeah, and progress builds more progress.
Yeah.
Because once you've achieved something big that you deliberately planned to set out to do, well, that gives you the confidence to go for the next thing. And then before you know it, you look back, it's 10 years and you've done lots of them.
Absolutely. Now, financially preparing for a career change can be a barrier and something that's quite fearful for a lot of people. How did you prepare for that aspect, and what is your advice to others?
Yeah, so it's a very valid question, and this is one of the key things I discovered whilst researching networking around what I do now. So as you mentioned earlier, typically, not always, but the most common route into becoming a financial planner is to be self-employed within an existing firm. And they're probably going to recognize that it's challenging at first, because it's hard to do business with people when you've got no clients. So you do need to be financially resilient. You do need to be able to assume that your income is going to be low for several months, but with the long-term goal being that it's a great career and can be financially rewarding. But with any plan, you've got to have an exit point. So don't go into anything without an exit strategy. Be as resilient as you can, and it's much easier to be resilient if you've got your family on the journey with you. But have a really clear point in your mind. Okay, if this doesn't work out, this is what will tell me it's not working out, and this is when I'm going to decide that I've had a crack at this, but I need to have a crack at something else now.
And often when I'm speaking to people looking to make a career change, one of the questions they frequently ask is, my current role or my previous role, sometimes people are on a career break, for example, my previous role, I earn X. How quickly, if you're going into self-employment, can I get back to that level? So how long did that take you from your military career in financial advice?
Yeah, and that's where the range of outcomes is massive in financial planning. Being self-employed in a new profession is always going to be, it's all dependent on how well you do.
Yeah. So
that kind of pressure, jeopardy, is actually a massive motivator as well.
Yeah.
And some people need pressure to perform at their best. In my case, it was 12 months from going live, but it could be much shorter than that. It could be much longer than that. And you need to be ready for all of those.
That's it. So it's almost future-paced different scenarios, and can you financially weather the timelines that you've projected? And as you say, have a point where you say, no, enough's enough. But really, really be motivated to make it happen shorter time.
Absolutely. You need to go into it assuming that you're not going to, but obviously depends what background you've come from professionally, what your family circumstances are, because they will differ hugely. And as I know from dealing with hundreds of clients nowadays, that actually the biggest impact on whether you're going to be financially all right in the future is how much do you spend. Like, you can have all the money in the world, but if you spend too much of it, things are going to be tricky.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, if your outgoings are relatively low, well, you can deal with most things. But yeah, you need to go into it assuming that, for a couple of years, you need to assume that you're not going to be at the revenue level you're hoping to get to, and you need to be ready to deal with that, because otherwise it would be a distraction and you wouldn't be able to concentrate on becoming professionally really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good advice. Thank you. Now, your military career saw quite an exciting role, I would have said, being a helicopter pilot, although may have had its negative impact as well. But is there anything that you're working on right now that excites you?
So I've gone through a period of where I've learned everything I possibly can from all my colleagues and from working with clients, and there's still much more to learn. Anyone who thinks there isn't more to learn is way overconfident. I'm very conscious there's still more to learn. But I have started to realise, who are the clients I really love working with, which problems I love solving, and therefore I want to spend more of my time dealing with those kind of clients. And so how do I find them? That's the stage I'm at now. I've got the CFP badge. I feel like I've gone through my apprenticeship period, and now it's find a niche and get great in that niche.
Is that business owners? Is it?
Yeah, I love working with business owners.
Yeah.
Because they all have an interesting journey. They've probably created something from nothing. It's a huge part of who they are, but at some point they need to move away from that. And then of course that comes with
tax efficiencies and all of that.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
You've got to really help them to understand what's gonna make them tick once they're no longer the business owner that was a huge part of who they were, and how they're going to be tax efficient, and how do they know they're going to be okay. Letting people know that they're going to be fine no matter what happens. Or if that's not the case, making sure they're going to be. Yeah, business owners, great example. Professionals as well, like city professionals, typically very time poor, lots of tax issues, lots of, I know what I'm doing today, but how does this all add together in 20 years' time? That's, another area complex advice that I love working in.
So the final question is a question that we ask to all of our guests. What is the best piece of invaluable advice that you've been given? Now, this could be in your personal or your professional life.
I've got two, if that's okay.
Of course.
So the first one is for someone who's making a career change. I've already labelled it already, but this is the point. Spend absolutely ages working out what makes you tick, what excites you, where you want to be in 5 years' time, because once you know that, the rest becomes relatively straightforward. You can view opportunities as whether they're right for you or whether they're not, and the motivation will come with it. Because once you've got something you want to do, you'll find the motivation to get there. And the second one is for people a little bit behind me on the financial planning profession, and this still applies to me today, but know your tools. All the solutions we offer to clients, they're just the tools. They should be the output from planning. And if you don't know how every tool in your toolbox works, you're not going to be considering every option that a client might need, and you're going to miss opportunities and fail to give the client the holistic plan they need.
Amazing advice. Thank you. It's been fascinating listening to your career change journey, Henry. How can people find you?
LinkedIn.
Find you on LinkedIn. And Henry is being very modest because he has his own career change podcast facing into to people just like you leaving the military. So what's the name of the podcast and where can they find that?
Yeah, it's called Boots to Suits. You can see it, find it on the typical app stores, depending on what kind of device you have. And there's three of us who have the podcast. We started it when I was in the early days of leaving the forces, and one of my former colleagues, was ahead of me. He'd launched the business, and one of them was still in the forces getting out. And it was all about helping people leave the forces and go into career changes. And how do you work out what's important to you? how do you research it, how do you get interviews, how do you pass interviews, and how do you turn up on day one. But we actually found it appealed to a much broader audience because it applies to anyone going for a career change. So
absolutely,
boots to suits.
Check it out, everybody. Thank you very much for being on the show, Henry.
Thank you very much, Gee.
A big thanks to Henry for joining us on the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of The Switch, make sure to follow, rate and share it with somebody who's ready for a career change. And if you're on your own journey, hit subscribe. We've got plenty more inspiration and insight coming your way. I'm Gee Foottit and you've been listening to The Switch from St James's Place Financial Advisor Academy.